is your bridge to the land and people of Israel. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Israel Connect. And today I have a very special guest, Ruth Guggenheim, who lives in Jerusalem. And she recently was an attendee at the National Religious Broadcasters Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. There was a very special event hosted by Israel 365 about Keep God's Land. And so, Ruth, welcome to this edition of Israel Connect. And can you tell us a little bit more about the event that you spoke at and what it was all about?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's wonderful to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. You look wonderful. It's nice to speak to your followers. So thank you very, very much. The NRB this year was actually very, very focused on what's going on in Israel. It was amazing from that point of view how so many within the Christian media world has stepped up to the plate to realize that not only what's happening in Israel is affecting Israelis and the people there, but it's affecting and it will affect everybody if the mindset and ideology of the terrorists continue to grow and to reach over into North America and everywhere else where they are planting seeds. They have been planting seeds for quite a while, and it's becoming quite obvious what their intentions are, not just with the Jewish community, but ultimately with the Christian community. And I think some of the focus had to do with how we as Jews and Christians need to stand together and raise awareness, not only that it's going to stop in Israel, but that it will continue. And this is where God is leading us to partner, to strengthen ourselves so that we can fight this evil, to be perfectly honest.
Yes.
And the whole focus around the Keep God's Land, it was launched at NRB. It was launched specifically to raise awareness that this is God's biblical homeland. And this is, if you are a believer, if you understand what the Torah and the Tanakh talk about, perpetuity, and it was given to us as a gift from God, and we are to steward it. But the reality, are we off? Oh. But the reality is all of us have to work together to keep God's land, and not the woke media or the media that wants to totally create another narrative that doesn't even have any basis in fact. And Ambassador Friedman had spoken. He launched actually his game plan that was a follow-up after the Abraham Accords and how things could go forward. He spoke extensively. He will be promoting his vision and his documentation from here on in, and to raise awareness about those who really want to listen to the facts and figures. Hamas is not looking for a two-state solution. The bottom line is many people have absolutely no idea. They believe that, if only Israel would just give over some land or be accepting of a two-state solution. Once that discussion is looked at very, very seriously, Israel no longer will exist, because the reality is anybody can look in Google on the charter, the Hamas charter, which is extremely specific about basically annihilating the Jews, annihilating the Zionistic entity, and they don't have any desire for a two-state solution. There were many people that prior to October 7th, the more secular or left-leaning Israelis, there were, after October 7th, that changed significantly. I mean, even those people that wanted to believe that it was a possibility, we all want to believe in peace, obviously. We all want that possibility. But even those, it was a bit different, a little while. But the reality is, to go back to the NRB, the Keep God's Land launch it's going to be an ongoing outreach to the world, raising awareness, public relations, speaking, coming to North America more often to talk land is all about. And also what was really interesting is totally across the board at the NRB constituency and board of directors adopted the concept that they would no longer call it the West Bank, that they will call it the biblical homeland. They will call it the heartland, Judea and Samaria as it is, because there's no such thing as the West Bank. That's not in the Bible or point. If they start acknowledging that this is a country that was one country given by God, and that it is the homeland, and aside from all the politics and everything, you have to look at the realities of the facts that have been there for thousands of years. And you can't just start naming countries whatever you want to. And obviously the charter with Hamas and Hezbollah and all that and Iran is to just deny any connection that the Jews have to Israel. So, these are things that your listeners and all of us have to be aware of. Cumbersome to get into now, but I think as pieces come out into the media, it would be good to explore that within the churches and within home bases so that people understand what options we really. That was a really, I think, very positive takeaway at NRB. Since you and I have been there, 4 years ago, the narrative has become much more pro-Israel. I think more and more people are just aware that politically or religiously, but that as and people listen to you in the media, and your voice should be heard.
So if people want to get involved with the Keep God's Land movement, here's what they can do. There is a website. It's called KeepGodsLand.com. And if you go to that website, and it's also going to be listed in the description box below, you can sign up to get on the email newsletter list and be aware of what the next event is going to be, and also add your name to the petition. So basically, Keep God's Land is part of the sovereignty movement of pushing back against the two-state delusion. And I have to say, I'm extremely disappointed and even ashamed of how the Biden administration's position has been towards Israel since the war broke out. Initially, it seemed like they were in support of Israel, but Biden has been doing a full court bench press, really pressuring Israel through the State Department, through Anthony Blinken, to go for a two-state solution. And they even at one point a couple of weeks ago said, well, we're going to unilaterally declare, decree, and recognize a Palestinian state. And they were having talks in Egypt with Arabs and Palestinians and with the State Department about this unilateral declaration of a Palestinian state. And so not even including or involving Israel in the talks or discussion. So thankfully, Netanyahu and the Knesset came back and said, no, we're not going to have any part of this. We're going to finish this war. And so I guess the next big operation is Israel going into Rafah to take out the last 3 or 4 squadrons of Hamas terrorists. And so our hearts and our prayers go with Israel and the Jewish people in finishing up the war down in Gaza. And then I guess the next front of the war will, they're looking to the north with Lebanon and Hezbollah. And actually, Hezbollah and Hamas are simply proxies of Iran. They are truly the head of the snake. So thank you so much for the role that you had at the NRB with the launch event of Keep God's Land. Maybe you could share with us, for those of us who were not able to attend, a little bit about what you spoke about at this conference.
So that particular component was actually cut in half. It was interesting because President Trump was, or past President Trump was coming that night. So they had to shut everything down, start the security searches and all that. So they cut every program and we had to leave every room. So unfortunately, which was an amazing dialogue on Jewish-Christian relations. That's what was the whole goal of what I kind of was talking about with my colleagues there, and to discuss how we as Jewish and Christian believers can move forward, how people within the realm of Judaism can really, if it hasn't already started in a community, how it can go, and how it's so important that the Christian community, especially here in America, or there in America, but I am here now, how in America, this voice of the Christian right can make a huge difference. So as we move forward in our journey together, in terms of supporting each other, how can we as Jews and Christians raise awareness about keeping God's land, about the fact that even if we have, if we don't always agree in everything theologically or ideologically, we do believe, we respectfully disagree, but we can also agree or we can move forward. And that was pretty much what the goal was there, is that and to grow these relationships.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. I also understand that Israel 365 had a special exhibit called Israel's War Room, and people could walk through it and experience a little bit of what a war room is like. And I guess there was an IDF soldier there and different speakers. Can you share a little bit more about
Yeah,
Israel's War Room?
it was, first of all, they opened it up with not comfortable footage from the 10/7 massacres, but that was an important component. A lot of people, certainly in America, don't see some of the footage that we have seen, and even that has been the evil and the desire to totally destroy our people. So it started there. Then we moved into the next cell, the soldier, but also being recalled up because, as you may know, a lot of the military, everybody came back in terms of if you had been a past soldier, but you've already been released because you did your time. So many of the reserves just came their children behind. Some of them haven't seen them for months and that, but so that was discussed though, and also shown to some people who may not be quite aware of the actual map of Israel and how small of a country it is. And when you're talking about defense on one front versus the other front, so he went through that. Then we went to the next cell. The next room was a couple of family members from some of the hostages spoke. Okay, so they had brought in some family members to talk about their loved ones who are still in, as they are still hostages. We do not know now in terms of a ceasefire. Is we want to just know who's alive. They won't even give names of who is currently still alive. That says something right there. But so we heard from these two different families, and that was very heart-wrenching. And at the end, actually, in some of them, I had an opportunity to talk. Israel plays is providing crisis counseling, and we have been known of peace or in good time. We deal with just everyday crisis that families are going through or things that you need to deal with. But now they set into mode the crisis counseling centers that are focusing on families of hostages, the military that their families are suffering. You have a lot of women that have been left where their husbands have been in the military, like I said, for a couple of months. They're left with small children at home. Many of them have been dislocated. They're no longer living in their comfort of their home, but they have been living in hotel rooms for 4 months, like one little hotel room with 3, 4, 5 kids. It's psychologically and emotionally, it makes people at their breaking point. So Emunah has stepped up to provide our trauma counselors.
Hold on. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen and share the website of Emunah. And to give a little bit of background, Ruth is a key leader in the Emunah organization, and she is a part of Emunah Israel. And you can go to the website emunahangels.org and learn more. And so she is a part of this organization, which has been around for a long time. And they outreach to people in Israel who need help, to children who are orphans, people who are terrorist victims, and that sort of thing. So this is the organization that Ruth works with. And so Ruth, maybe you could tell us a little more about how the war has impacted the people that you're serving in Israel, and how us Christians, how can we get involved? How can we be a blessing to Israel? What can we do to help support what you're doing? So why don't you go ahead and pick it up there? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So as you mentioned, Emunah has been around for a very long time. It's actually been 85 years, a little over 85 years. It was started right around the realization after that the Holocaust was imminent. It was going to be happening. There had already been a lot of issues with Jews in Europe, and we had a group of Anglo religious Jewish women who tried and did get some of the children, like on the kinder transports that were able to take children out of like Germany or France and that into England. And they brought some of these children to Israel and started setting up some of the very first shelters for these orphans. They ultimately became orphans. The goal was obviously they would just be taking care of them until mom and dad came back. But unfortunately, as we know, that didn't happen for most anybody. So these children ultimately became part. So Emunah actually provided that shelter. These women set that up and then moved on into schools and into therapeutic services. And it's just continued to grow. We have over 160 projects across the country that has to do with basic needs, whether it's helping the elderly and the Holocaust survivors to get food for holidays, to have home visits, to take them to medical care. So it starts from that generation. But the reality is we really start at infant. Okay, we have the largest network of subsidized daycare centers, young child into daycare so that you can go work or go to school or finish your vocational training to become a better parent. The subsidized daycare centers and child care centers are the backbone to society, to any society, because as a parent, you want to know your child is in good hands. In Israel, from 3 years old to 5 years old, till they enter first grade, they are basically it's paid for by the government, most of the daycare. But from 3 months or 6 months, depending on when you may go back to work after your child is born, up until 3 years, that's completely on the parents. And most parents in the country can't afford daycare on a day-to-day basis. And certainly the people that we help are immigrants or Ethiopians or refugees, and many of them have really no money. So Emunah raises funds specifically to provide these quality daycare opportunities for the children throughout the land of Israel. So Laura, that's a part of what we do. We are literally one of the largest humanitarian aid community service-oriented organizations. Our residential homes, which have about 1,100 children, they are kids that are either orphaned, they've been abandoned, they've been abused, and they have been removed from their homes due to court orders. When we raise them, they can come into our system, to our 5 different homes. Anyway, but what's interesting, some of our residential homes, even though they're no longer obligated to take care of the children from a legal point of view, if you have children, all of us who have children, your kid didn't really stop being your child at 18, and you're still going to be the mom or the dad, and you need to be there and support them. So we have started GAP apartments, kind of like the Emunah GAP programs, where these kids go to the Army, but they come back to Emunah homes like they would to mom and dad. Okay, so they have a place to always call home, a place for the holidays, a place for Shabbat. So that's the Emunah system. Women who started Emunah, when they decided the name, they gave it Emunah, faith, because we have 100% faith that God will return his people to the Holy Land and he will provide for us. And yes, we do have to do our own, but God will provide.
I understand too that you've been hosting a weekly Zoom meeting where people are getting updates about the latest regarding the war in Israel and how they can be involved. So if somebody wanted to plug into that and get onto that list for the Zoom meetings, how would they get on that list?
I think right now the best thing is to write to me, ruth@worldemunah.org. If you could post it, that would be great. I would send the link. We started this podcast. It's an informal podcast that began literally a couple of weeks after October 7th. And with my Christian ambassadors that actually are located in Nashville, near Nashville, Tennessee, they hosted, it's called the Christian Friends of Emunah podcast. So they hosted a gentleman also named Mark Jenkins, who is very active in the Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial. He ran the Christian desk. He's a pastor. So between Melissa and Stephen Briggs and Jenkins, they are the main Christian hosts who talk about Israel, and we always have different interviews. And I, as the Israeli Jew, a gentleman from Zaka. Zaka is the organization that literally does God's holy work, because they go in after every attack or accidents. They have gone around the world where there have been tsunamis, where Surfside, where buildings have imploded. They have the holy work and dignity of gathering the body parts. I know it sounds, it's not a work that someone wants to do, but it is God's holy work, because giving the body, the person, the dignity of burying as much as that, what they did on October 7th and the 1,000, they had to identify those 1,200 soldiers and
civilians too.
Yeah. So it was like, I'm telling you, there wasn't a dry eye after. It's very powerful. And so that is what we're trying to do with the podcast, similar to you, is to raise awareness of what's really, everybody feels for Israel. Thank God our Christian friends are behind us. But looking to do something, to get involved, we give them that opportunity the same way you might give them the opportunity. Connecting up is the first step. Just write to me and let's start the conversation. I'll get you the links.
I will list your email in the program description below so people can reach out and get on your email list so they can participate in those weekly Zoom meetings. So Ruth, it has been such an honor and a pleasure and a joy to meet with you today. Our hearts and our prayers go out to Israel, to the IDF, to the hostages that are still in captivity. And we pray that this war will come to an end soon, that the IDF will have victory over Hamas, that Hamas will be completely eliminated out of Gaza, that the remaining hostages would be rescued and brought home to their families. And for the peace of Jerusalem, we will give God no rest until Jerusalem is appraised throughout all of the earth. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have any final words?
Your followers may want to get, but again, the more that we stand united in God's name and we pray for the peace of Jerusalem and we just hold hands and move forward, I think, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Can you hold up your hand and we'll just kind of do a virtual handshake?
You got it. Okay. Shalom, Nihitra, to everybody. Thank you for having me. And God willing, we will see you in Israel.
Yes. Shalom.